Synergy podcast is the space where we redefine how we move, heal, and experience our bodies. My name is Arianna Montanari, yoga synergy teacher, beekeeper, and founder of Strega Natural Body Products. Sustainability in all forms is the thread I've been following and nourishing for over 20 years. Here, we break free from the unspoken rules that tell us how we should move and feel. Here, we long for deeper connection with nature, with ourselves, so through intuitive movement, self-care, and self-awareness. We explore what it truly means to work with the body instead of pushing against it, to understand it rather than criticize it. So whether you're a yogi, a seeker, or simply curious about stepping into a more liberated way of living, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome to a new episode of the Synergy podcast. This is Arianna Montanari, your host. I have the pleasure to welcome a fellow synergista, as I call, Stefan Camilleri. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Stefan, been studying and teaching all kinds of yoga for over 12 years. Your journey in yoga included persistent injuries caused by working too rigidly, maybe too hard in your practice in earlier days. And you coming in contact with Simon Borg-Olivier, our teacher, has revolutionized your practice and proper approach to movement. And we will go into that in just a moment. And I also want to mention, last but not least, that you are the founder of Lanka Yoga, a purpose-built center for immersive, transformative trainings in Sri Lanka. So once again, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you. Let's start from a kind of a standard question that I ask to most of my guests. And that is about your journey through yoga, through movement. In your description, you named your injuries. And I think that many yogis, many movers out there kind of deal with injuries or pain or a little bit of discomfort all the time. And we maybe normalize it, but what's important for us to share with whoever is listening to this episode is that is not normal. A normal body is potentially pain-free if we know how to move. So please go into that, and if you feel called for it, maybe places in the world, since you live an international life, and people who have changed your life, like Simon did. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I was first introduced to yoga in 2012. After a back injury. I used to work in a factory. I was doing mechanical engineering stuff, so working with these massive machines. And there was one job where we were putting a pipe in under a road. It's like a 12-hour night shift, and at the end of my back was kind of a bit sore, and it got worse and worse and worse, and it turns out I'd inflamed some of the discs in my lower back. And long story short, ended up with chronic lower back pain. And it was pretty debilitating back pain. It hurt to sit. It didn't just hurt to do things, it hurt to sit. So for 6 months, I was like lying down or moving. And I didn't really, although I was introduced to some yoga things, I was doing lots of exercise. I was swimming every day. I was doing weight training. I was doing some yoga exercises. I was walking. My back was getting better, but it wasn't healing to the point where I could go back and do normal things again. And long story short, instead of I tried to go back to my old job. And instead of doing that, I ended up taking a yoga teacher training because I'd been introduced to yoga and yoga had helped. And yoga had also made me feel calm in a way that I hadn't felt before. I didn't realize that the kind of stress and anxiety that was bouncing around in my head wasn't normal. It wasn't something that I had to live with every day. So I introduced to a few yoga classes in this really old style called Gita yoga, which I assume you haven't heard of. No, not many people have. And it was taught at a gym, this old guy, me and 5 or 6 elderly people.
At the gym?
At the gym, yeah. Because a friend had introduced me. A friend had said, come to yoga. I go to yoga once a week. Come, I think you'll enjoy it. And I said, oh, yoga, that sounds lame. I do a few cat-cows or whatever. But I went anyway, and by the end of the class, I was like, "Why? My back doesn't hurt." That's the first thing. Weird. And the second thing is, I feel so good in my body. I don't understand what we were doing or why we were doing it. Why are we doing these funny movements? It was really old school. You'd be like, you go into a lunge shape and go forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards. Then you go left leg, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards, backwards. Then you'd say shoulder stand. You do shoulders. It's just, to my understanding now, it made no sense. But God, I felt good. And the teacher had encouraged me to do a teacher training. So I Googled it. I was in Melbourne at the time. I was living in Melbourne. And the first one that came up, the school that was paying the most for Google ads, it turns out, had an advanced diploma of yoga teacher training. And I said, that sounds serious. So I signed up for that, which I did part-time over a year. But that was very trendy vinyasa. This is 2013 now, so trendy vinyasa yoga. It was loud music, 35 degrees. It's hot. It's like noisy. It's pose, 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 inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And I felt I felt so out of place. You have no idea. Like, I'd come from working in a factory, where an Australian factory, people are just swearing the whole time. It's so macho. And all of a sudden I'm in a room with, it was packed as well, 30, 35 beautiful people with cool music, doing cool movements. Everyone's like, do you want to get a latte after class? I'm like, oh, is that coffee? You know, it was a whole nother world, and I felt so out of place. But I did it because it was helping me, you know. And it turns out I had a bit of a knack for it, because I'd taught music when I was a kid. I'd taught drums. So communicating wasn't hard. And in 2013, 2014, I think I could have counted the amount of male yoga teachers in Melbourne on one hand. So as soon as I wasn't even qualified, as soon as I was almost qualified, I was working. And before I was qualified, I was teaching full time. And the transition from feeling so out of place to feeling like, oh yeah, I'm one of these people, to all of a sudden like, oh, now I'm one of the teachers in this new community, was very quick. Probably not very good for my ego at the time as well, because all of a sudden there's these 35 beautiful people and I'm putting on my favorite songs and I'm saying, breathe in, and everyone breathes in. I'm like, whoa, I'm so powerful. And through that process, my back, which is why I got into yoga, was getting better, but it wasn't fixed. I was going through waves and I didn't understand it. It's one of the reasons I was so interested in studying yoga, was to help understand what things actually do what. Because I knew it at the start, I knew yoga makes my back feel better. But then I started to realize sometimes it makes it feel worse. Sometimes it makes it feel better. Sometimes it makes no difference. Sometimes I feel calmer. Sometimes I feel more energized. And I wanted to understand how these things worked. And my first training gave me a better understanding than I had before, but I still didn't get it. It was still a bit of a mystery as to what works. So I decided I'll go to India and I'll study more. And I was probably 23 at this point, it's 2014, and it's cheap. So I flew to India, stayed for 3 months, did another teacher training in Hatha yoga, and was introduced to Iyengar yoga, which I loved because it felt like so much structure and so many rules. And I thought that must be good, because if there's more rules, it's more specific. If it's more specific, then I can learn what's actually working and what's not. But what was missing was the explanation of how it works or why it works. It was just do this and move the inner skin that way and the outer hairs this way and compress the bone via the, the Iyengar cues, the ridiculous Iyengar cues. And then your back will feel better. And I'd be like, wow, my back does feel better. But how did that work? And then I found out that Iyengar teachers train their whole lives. So I'm like, oh, I just must not know enough. I have to study more. So I kept studying. I was introduced to this lady, Sadie Nardini. I don't know if you've heard of her. She was a bit of a big deal 10 years ago, this American teacher who had a TV show, like a cable TV yoga show, where she'd interview people like Leslie Kaminoff and whatever. She came to one of my classes in Melbourne and then said, you've got something, come teach with me. So then I went, studied with her, and her stuff was really cool. It was synergy-ish. The movements were through the spine, it wasn't straight lines. So my first yoga training was all moving like this. She was this, which was revolutionary at the time. So I had this stuff, I had the Iyengar stuff, and I was kind of just teaching and studying and traveling and being a bit of a hippie. And then somehow I started, probably because of Sadie, I started working on trainings. I'd been teaching for 2 years. I started working on trainings. I think because of the experience that I'd had, and because I had the ego, the charisma, I was willing to say yes and willing to stand in front of 30 people and pretend that I knew stuff. So I'm traveling and I'm teaching and I start working on trainings. And as I'm working on trainings, I'm thinking, I remember going to the lecture of the other teacher who organized the trainings. This was a training in Bali in like 2016. And just thinking, I don't think this is very good. Like, I feel like I could do better than this. So I just organized my own training and started running my own ones I've been teaching for 2.5 years. I don't think they were very good, but better than nothing, maybe. And so at this point, now it's 2017, I'm running my own training. So now I'm a small business person. We'll get to that. I'm going to India every year and studying with my Iyengar teachers, basically. I started going on a vigil every year for 1 to 3 or 4 months. And in between that, I'm just traveling around, teaching a bit here and there, being a bit of a hippie. And then at some point, all of that caught up with me and I started getting new injuries. So my story with injuries is kind of my pre-yoga, basically my back was stuffed. Get into yoga and it's the vinyasa, Ashtanga-based vinyasa, and I start having sore wrists sometimes, sore shoulders sometimes, sore neck sometimes. But, you can manage that to some degree. Like, oh, my wrist is sore if I do too many handstands. Do less handstands for a while, wrist gets better, that kind of stuff. But the Iyengar injuries were the worst because they were from tension and from repetitive strain. So I ended up with chronic inflammation in my sternum. Can you imagine? Like, all here was on fire all the time. You know what it was from? Back bends, like just overdone back bends. And I was trying to make up for the back bending because I knew I was doing so much chest opening. I'm like, I'll do push-ups every day because that will balance the back bends. And that's also like crunching if you do it too much. And I started on 10 a day. I ended up on like 50 a day. So imagine 50 push-ups a day. So I stay strong. Back bends 3 hours a day. I'm exaggerating, but too much. So chronic inflammation here and chronic inflammation of my hamstring attachments, which is one of the most common yoga injuries for hardcore practitioners. So my bum hurts when I fold forward. My chest hurts when I do anything. And at this point, it's 2019. I'm a full-time yoga teacher. I'm teaching 3 trainings a year. That's my job. I practice Iyengar. That's my hobby, basically. And now I'm like, I can't practice and I can't teach. What on earth am I going to do? Like, this is my whole life. So I actually took a break from yoga on the advice of a physiotherapist who was like, if you keep doing this, you're going to destroy yourself. You have to stop. 2018 or 19, I took 3 months off from practicing and I started running, doing weights, jumping, doing everything opposite of yoga. And my body felt so much better. And at this point, I'm like, okay, I need a new job. I have to find a new thing. This is officially a crisis. Like, I'm talking to my friends, like my yoga teacher friends. I'm like, I don't get it. I thought yoga was supposed to help people. It's destroying me. If it's destroying me, how do I keep teaching this? What, am I going to run a training and say, by the way, my body's a mess? Am I going to lie? Like, this makes no sense. And a great friend of mine, Sarah Zavik, said, why don't you study with Simon? He would be able to help with stuff like this. And I'd heard about him. I'd done some of his stuff online, whatever, and I thought it was just weird and kooky and he's moving too much. Who's this guy with the music and whatever? But I gave it a shot just online and I could do it. That was the first thing. I was like, oh, I can do this and I don't feel worse. It was like, remember that when I first did yoga classes, I was like, I feel better. I don't understand it, but I feel better. The same thing happened when I started practicing Simon stuff. I'm like, I don't get this. This is weird, but I feel so good and it doesn't make my injuries feel worse. So long story short, I sent him an email. I'm like, Simon, I think I have to study with you. And he's such a nice guy. He's like, great, here's my schedule. And here's some free online stuff. It turns out he was going to be in Perth when I was there running a teacher training with the one that I was stressed about, thinking I'm going to be a fraud. So a week into this teacher training, I excuse myself Friday afternoon and I go and do 3 days with Simon. Completely changed my understanding of yoga, my understanding of the body. And I go back the Monday after and I say, guys, we have to have a talk. Here's the thing. I've been saying bring your belly to your spine. I'm wrong. I don't really understand this stuff that I just did other than it's the best thing ever and I can't teach anything else now. Problem is I don't really understand it. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go home every night and I'm going to do Simon's online course. I'm going to come back in the morning and I'm going to teach you what I know of yoga from the last 6 years or whatever it had been. Plus, I'm going to integrate some of this stuff that I'm learning at the moment. Is that okay? And these guys were like, yeah, great, let's do it. So I kind of ran this weird hybrid training. And then after that, it was like, okay, Simon, when are you doing your training? I'm coming. I went to Goa, did his training, came back, rewrote my teacher training manual. That was a big job. said bring belly to the spine. I meant expand belly, cross out, write the opposite. Rebuilt my course, reorganized the schedule, everything. And then from then on, and we'll get into the business stuff, but that was around the time that I started my own place in Sri Lanka. And then since then, basically after COVID, I've been running 4 synergy trainings a year based on, the stuff that I'd done before and my experience being a vinyasa yoga teacher, and then all of Simon's stuff. And I guess what I try and do is bring Simon's stuff into what would be more mainstream yoga. So the idea is that a graduate from my course can go to Berlin or to London or to Stockholm, whatever, and teach a class at a studio using synergy principles, but they're not necessarily with side trance on, facing the other way, clicking, doing just joint movements, So trying to be the bridge, in a sense, between Simon's stuff and what people think modern yoga is, and land somewhere in the middle where you can kind of branch off into let's go full 5 clicks Simon stuff, or let's go into something that a normal vinyasa class or a normal student could turn up and say, I want to do a yoga class, and you teach them and they go, I feel good. It was a bit weird, but it's familiar enough, So yeah, a bit of a spiel there, but
it really sounds like you have that ability to be flexible. So you have really adapted your exercise to your body. So you were really thinking, okay, let's pause a little second here because my body is broken. I'm in pain, so something is wrong. Let's try another way. So you have explored what there is out there and what works for you, and then really put that into practice. And I think this is such a precious asset when you're teaching, because you have lived it yourself. You know how it is. You know what works for you and what doesn't. And then you can be also a better communicator. And the last thing that you said, that you kind of try to combine your experience with the Simon teachings and make it, I call it a more digestible, because sometimes, right, Simon can be like, if the regular person come to a drop-in class,
exactly,
just done hatha or whatever, like Ashtanga, just regular vinyasa classes, and come to a full synergy or 5-dimensional flow class, it's like, what is this? And so I think that really our work is to blend it in a way that it's more understandable. With time, we can deepen the practice. We need to blend it in with, like you said, more familiar practices.
I mean, it depends, but that last point depends on the context. So if, for example, I was going to teach a yoga class in a city at a vinyasa studio, I need to understand what the expectations are of the studio owners, but more importantly, the students, and to give them something that both lines up with my understanding of what is best practices, let's say for movement, breathing, posture, whatever, but also is familiar enough that I'm not going to have that moment like you explained sometimes happens with Simon stuff, where people go, oh, that's too different, But if I was teaching at a festival and I've got a movement workshop, whatever, then I can teach whatever other stuff.
Absolutely.
The context really matters. Because you're not there for yourself. You're there for the benefit of other people as a teacher at the end of the day. So, and then having gone through all of those injuries, and most importantly, from doing things that I thought were good for me, that's at the time when I was doing the back bends and the push-ups, I thought that was good for me. So that also gives me some humility of the stuff I'm doing now, I think is good for me now. So how do I know that? And I have to, that forces me to dig a little bit more into, well, how do these things actually work? Not just it feels good, therefore good. I mean, heroin, I'm sure, feels good. Alcohol feels good. It's not good for you. It feels good. So sometimes we can also trick ourselves just by using that one metric of how does it make you feel? That's important, but then it's also, and how is it working? How's the mechanism working? Ecstasy works by giving you heaps of dopamine. Okay, so the mechanism is not the same as if I was to go for a run and then feel better after a run. That's a different mechanism. Is that good for me? Well, it depends on the context,
So this is what you're really working on, so really understanding why it works and what it does.
Yeah, I think it's fundamental. And I would also make the argument that in the yoga world, we sometimes get stuck on the it feels good, so do it. Or my teacher told me, so do it that way. So for example, like people, a lot of yoga teachers say, lift your arms up, bring your shoulders down.
Yeah.
And if you ask the teachers, like, why do you do that? They'll say, oh, because it makes space for the neck. And it's like, yeah, but why do you do that? Because my teacher said. And as the teacher explained it to you, they said it creates space for the neck or whatever. And you, yeah. And you believe them because they're a point of authority. It's like, yeah. Okay, interesting. But where did they get it from? They got it from their teacher, who got it from their teacher, who got it from their teacher. Maybe we need to reassess some of these things, you know.
Yeah, question them.
Yeah. You know, why, for who, in what circumstance? Like, these things matter. Sometimes it's a one-size-fits-all thing in the yoga world that can get in the way of people's experience. They end up with sore shoulders, for example, and then they don't understand why. Their teacher said it's good for them, then their shoulders hurt, then they might not come back.
I see this quite often. On one hand, so that's also my story. I used to practice Ashtanga, rocket, so very fun practice. I think this is what gets you hooked because it's fun, stronger, it's fast. And so you do not really have the time to do it properly. There is no real warm up. And so sore wrists for years, shoulder, my back pain, my knee would hurt from all the binding. And this is why I got into thinking, I want to learn more because there has to be a way. I had thoughts, I'm going to be paralyzed by the time I'm 40. My body hurts so much. And so when I got into contact with Simon, it was so different that it immediately felt that here there is something worth learning about. It makes sense. It's using physiotherapy as a base.
Exactly.
It's not just this, we do it like this because this is how we do it. No, there was always an explanation, a mechanical explanation on why we do things and when to do things in the practice. And so I see how I teach mostly classes, like weekly classes, studio, and often people come saying, I have tried yoga, but it was maybe too fast, or it was too still, and so it was a little bit boring, or it hurts, or I felt I was not good enough.
Yep.
So when they come to class, it's about also creating that safe space and saying, okay, so you might have experienced yoga maybe more as a fitness class. How about we try to experience yoga more of a movement? Just take it as a moment for you to just feel good, to move your body, and set yourself up for success. So know and feel that you can do these movements in your own way without doing too much. But of course, then we come to the point that you said earlier, just because something feels good, it doesn't mean that it's good. I think is a reflection that comes after a long time that you have practiced something. I think that at the beginning, so with people who come from a history of doing something that maybe hurts or more training oriented, we need to first switch into, okay, this I think feels less, right? I remember when I switched to synergy, it felt less stretch, less burning muscles, let's do extreme movements. And it was almost boring to kind of go through that and then almost relearn what it means to that a movement feels good. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's difficult in the sense of yoga is for some people a form of exercise. And if you try and judge how effective your exercise is, like one of the metrics that people use is how much sensation do I have? You know, and if you're comparing yoga synergy to CrossFit, CrossFit's going to win in how much sensation it gives you. The thing is, the same thing's happening in yoga as far as I found this yoga class really uncomfortable. Therefore, for some people, therefore they think, well, therefore it's good for me. Or it was exhausting, therefore it's good for me. Or it's whatever. So to try and share with people that maybe doing something that isn't exhausting or that isn't hurting so much, whatever, might be better for you is a bit of a hard sell sometimes. But it goes into the complexity, in my opinion, of the identity crisis of yoga in general. What is it? What's it for? Who's it for? Why do I do yoga? And if it's not to gain flexibility, maybe it is or maybe it isn't. But if I'm confused about the flexibility thing, if it's not about stretching, let's say, if it's not about making my muscles hurt, which therefore makes them bigger in my mind, if I'm not into spirituality or relaxing or whatever, I don't need to relax because I'm fine. What's it for? And for some people, it then becomes, well, yoga doesn't really make sense anymore. I'm going to Pilates because at least Pilates is clear. Pilates is about getting strong in your core and strong muscles and having a workout. Easy sell. Is that something I want or I don't want? When I go to Pilates, it will feel consistently difficult, easy. What is yoga anyway these days? I go to one yoga class, it's painful and difficult and complicated. I go to another yoga class, I'm doing burpees. I go to another yoga class, there's puppies in the room. I go to another yoga class, I'm just lying down, bored out of my brain. I go to another yoga class, the teacher's wearing a turban. It's confusing. It doesn't make sense. Yeah. And when we're doing something slightly different, the synergy stuff, which there's really good reasons to do, we somehow have to navigate people's expectations of all of these, wherever they've come from, all of their things, and then somehow reframe the expectation of, well, hopefully you're going to feel kind of calm, kind of relaxed, kind of in the present moment. And we have to do this little spiel of what yoga is to us. Sometimes we'll make the sale and sometimes we won't. It's difficult.
The experience of yoga it's almost like an interpretation. Every teacher you will go to will give their own interpretation. So for you, what is the most precious teaching or difference of the synergy practice, and how do you share it with others?
Well, we spoke about the why, the specificity of understanding a little bit how things work, the mechanisms. So rather than it being a random do this and this happens, like understanding where and why and how. But if I was to kind of make an argument for why synergy is so interesting and something that we should explore if you're into yoga, is the physiological aspects, like the understanding specifically of how the mechanisms of the body work and how they interact, and how by doing different movements, exercises, postures, whatever, we can regulate them. Let's use that word. So it's not just having, okay, yeah, I understand my heart beats and my lungs move and air comes in and out. It's like, okay, and then what can I do with movement, exercise, posture, mind control, meditation, whatever, that can then affect them and move them in a way. So rather than just I become aware that I'm feeling this or this is happening in my body, an ability to go, maybe I can change it a little bit. Maybe I can move that. Oh, I'm feeling elevated. I'm feeling excited, stressed, whatever. Like my heart rate's up, my muscles are tense, my whatever. And now I have a toolkit of things that I can do if I want to regulate that down, for example. Or the other way around, noticing, God, I'm feeling so lethargic and so heavy and so whatever. I can use tools and techniques and ideas to actually bring my nervous system up to better match the thing that I'm doing. I mean, I've used yoga synergy techniques I like this story because it sounds so dramatic, but I was once in a legal negotiation for Lanka Yoga, the thing in Sri Lanka. And it was a boardroom in the city with 9 people on the other side. I think 3 or 4 of them were lawyers, and it was so intimidating. I was so stressed physiologically, like my heart rate was up, my jaw was whatever. And I was able in that moment to go, I'm really stressed. If I can regulate down, that's going to be better for me. 1, I'll enjoy myself more, but 2, it will actually give me an advantage in this circumstance. So fingers can move, shoulders are free, head and neck is free, hips are free, relax pelvic floor, 1, 2, 3, jaw, lips, tongue, eyes. I did everything that I could do sitting in a meeting, and it became a whole different experience. And at one point I was able to sit there and go, oh, I actually feel really good, and watch the opponent on the other side who was stressed out of her head and go, oh, this puts me in a really good position. And then like my mind switched. I was like, oh, this is easy now. My pattern of thinking changed. And I'm like, I've managed to change my pattern of thinking by relaxing my pelvic floor. Yoga's amazing. I didn't even have to put do shoulder. Me 10 years ago would have been, I have to do shoulder stand right now for 3.5 minutes. That would have worked, but it wasn't very practical, So this stuff's amazing. And I can do that in a yoga class in Warrior 2. And when I practice it in Warrior 2, I'm training for those really stressful moments in life. You know, love this stuff. It's so good. It's so exciting. And it's a skill, even just a basic version of that. Like, just learn to relax your body in stressful situations and you'll feel less stressed. That's a skill that they should teach in schools, you know?
Yes.
Spend all this time learning algebra. Fine. Okay. Keep algebra, but 10 minutes a day, teach kids how to relax. You know? Walking around like this, go, yeah. Oh, no, nothing's wrong. Yeah, something's wrong. You're tense, bro. And the tension in your neck's going to go into your brain. I mean, I'm obviously being a little bit silly, but yeah. Anyway, that's my, as far as the synergy stuff, physiology, understanding physiology, and then learning to mess with it, to play with it. Amazing, you know?
Like to say, use it as a tool in your toolbox, to use it in your everyday life.
It's a superpower. If you are really able to understand this stuff and to use it, to be able to remind yourself to use it, I mean, you can achieve things that you never would have been able to achieve before, you know?
Yeah. Would you like to tell us about your project in Sri Lanka, since you mentioned adventure with lawyers?
Well, it's interesting. We've been talking just briefly about the stress response. And let me warn anyone who's thinking about doing some big project in Asia, because it seems so cheap and accessible, that I've never met anyone who's done a big project in Asia who hasn't had incredible amounts of stress. The story basically goes, I was renting venues to run trainings from 2017 to 2020. And at one point I was looking and I think I'd spent 40,000 euros in a year on venues. And I thought, if I owned the venue, that would be better. That was my first thought. My second thought was, it's really annoying that I can't fix things. Like, I go to a new venue and they have some issue. You know, let's say the portions of the food are too big. Whatever. I'm just like a random thing. I can't really I can ask them, but I'm not going to be able to affect change there. If I have my own venue, I can fix the portion sizes and I can pay myself, or, you know, a business that I own. So I just thought, I'll just start a retreat center in Sri Lanka. That'll be easy. It turns out that kind of thing's very difficult, which was exacerbated by COVID. Took the lease on the place as COVID was a small news story. And I think it was 6 weeks after we took the lease and had the place, the world shut down. So that was the start. Which was pretty stressful, especially not knowing how long it was going to go on for. And, you know, I was just refunding 30,000 euros worth of teacher training staff. And I was like, oh, that was the money that was to build the place and whatever. And then anyway, opened, and then had Sri Lanka had an economic crisis and then a revolutionary kind of thing. And then this is one thing after another. It's been very difficult, but it's also, of course, been very rewarding. And up until 4 or 5 weeks ago, when the world started going mad again, it was doing very, very well. And it had got to a point, I'm speaking in past tense now because we don't really know what's going to happen in the future, but it had got to a point about 6 weeks ago where we didn't even have to be there. We're living in Europe now. My wife is Czech, so we moved to the Czech Republic. We were just going to Sri Lanka basically to run the trainings, to check into the place a couple of times a year. It was full when we weren't there, full of outside retreat groups, because we'd basically set it up to run the trainings. And therefore you're like, oh, so we've got the staff and the food and the location and the rooms and everything. Let's rent it out to other people so it's not empty. I mean, we have 17 or 18 staff now as well, so you can't really pay them. The overheads make the amount of money we spend, like this next month when there's going to be no one there, is a bit scary. But anyway, but it was like, wow, we have a business now that kind of, besides a little bit of administration stuff and marketing stuff and whatever, more or less was running itself. But that then became a bigger job, or a more important job, than teaching yoga, which was a really weird and, in hindsight, obvious thing that was going to happen, but not something that I thought about. I thought, great, I'll have a place to teach. But then there's so much work that's not teaching yoga, and it's so much more important. Once I own a business that has, 18 employees, it's so much more important to make sure that works than to teach a class. So I don't teach, besides the trainings, I don't even teach anymore. And when I get up in the morning and I think about work, I think about marketing, administration, kitchen costs, honestly. And that's not, I'm not trained for that. I don't even, to be completely honest, I didn't have an interest in any of that. And all of a sudden that's my job. And I'm just so grateful that I still have the trainings, which means I have to click back into, oh yeah, I'm a yoga teacher. This is why I'm here. This is why this whole thing exists, 3 or 4 times a year. Because otherwise...
And that's what I was going to ask you, if you have had, because many yoga teachers, they start, myself too, right? You start as a yoga teacher and thinking, I want to teach classes. And then you suddenly get sucked into marketing and all the communication stuff and organizing retreats and taking bookings and building a website. And you're like, oh, wow, suddenly you need to be an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
How did you learn? How did you learn all the skills? Did you take any extra courses, or did you get help? Did you learn by doing?
This is, I guess, an undercurrent. Almost my whole life, I had this undercurrent of entrepreneurial things. I just didn't see it like that. For example, when I was working in that factory and I stopped working and I started the yoga training, I had to make money. So I started an eBay shop where I sold secondhand motorbike parts. I think it's a long story. My dad's always been this kind of, he was this scheming guy who's like, what if we bought that land and built 3 units on it? He never did it. But because he talked about that kind of stuff and he'd always talk with these massive numbers, we'd spend $500,000, suddenly be worth $2 million, and we'd have $1.5 million in the bank. I was like, oh, cool. So you can do that. So I started doing things like that. I actually, in 2015, me and a friend ran a music and yoga festival in Melbourne. It was massive. It got out of hand. We had 40 bands, 30-something yoga teachers. I think 1,200 people came, and we lost $80,000. It was great, except for the losing the money bit. Everything else was amazing. But that was also like my personality style. I'm a little bit ADD and a little bit like mad with this stuff. And I don't know if you've heard the term risk averse and risk tolerant. This is like entrepreneurs, people who end up doing are usually people who are very risk tolerant. They're willing to make big risks, and if there's a potential for it to be a reward. It turns out I'm very much like that, and I don't enjoy losing piles of money on projects like that festival. That was my life savings at the time, and my friend's life savings. She actually went into debt, gone. But God, I learned a lot. And then when it came to organizing a yoga teacher training, I was like, well, compared to a festival, it's easy. It can't be that hard. I remember the venue that I wanted didn't even want me to pay the whole amount until I got there. So I was like, so I can rent the venue and only give you $2,000. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, on my little piece of paper, I was like, okay, so risk for the training is $2,000. I can afford to lose $2,000. And I didn't, because people came, So the teacher trainings they're like mini events, and then as they got bigger and there's like 20 people coming and the venues are more expensive, I was like, okay, now I'm risking 30 grand per training, or I'm thinking Aussie dollars, 15,000 euros, whatever, per training. And I did once lose when there was a volcano in Bali, and I was running a training in Bali. I lost quite a bit of money, but it was, okay, I lost out of 10 trainings, 1 of them I lost money. Okay. So when it came to starting the venue, it was like, okay, this is just a giant version of that. Just get all the money you've got in the world and put it in a big pile and light it on fire and hope that it works out. And it did in the end. But I had to risk everything. And that's the thing when I speak to students or other teachers or whatever about, say, running retreats or whatever, I say, if you want to do something like that, you have to be willing to lose money as a lesson, and you have to have, like you mentioned, all these other skills that you don't necessarily have as a yoga teacher, building a website, social media marketing, SEO, Google ads, whatever. You've got to find people from somewhere. You've got to put them through a process somehow. You've got to show them what the event's going to be like. And all of those things require skill sets. And you can pay people to do those things, but that's a very inefficient way of doing it. You can then spend 10 grand to get a website done, whatever. But now that it's 2026, AI is unreal. And if you can leverage that, you can do a lot of this work from a chatbot, with help of a chatbot. And ideally with some help from, people who've done it before. But you do have to be willing to put the time, the effort, and the risk into some sort of endeavor that may pay you back and may pay you out, or it might not. My first retreat that I ran was in Malta, and I got it wrong. I ran a retreat in Malta for my students at the time, were mostly from Melbourne. I didn't think that through. I thought I wanted to go to Malta, so therefore they want to go to Malta. They're like, Steph, the flight's $2,500. I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. I lost money, but I learned a lot. And then I went on with the next one and the next one, and then it did well. Yeah. You've got to want to do all those other jobs rather than if you just want to teach yoga, just teach yoga. The problem with just teaching yoga is it's going to be a tough gig long term. It does get to a point with most people, you're 2-3 years in and you're teaching 15 classes a week and you're making some money, but not that much. And you're like, I don't know if I can do this the rest of my life. And we almost all end up doing something parallel with, but some things can be really great. I often use an example of a studio in Melbourne that some friends of mine started. They're running a retreat where they're making 60,000 euros in a week. Like, I'm not suggesting that I've never done that. I don't know if you've made 60,000 euros in a week. I don't know many people who have. But the fact that that's a possibility is insane. They just marketed to the right people. They had really wealthy clients. So they're like, how much do you guys want to spend? Turns out they'll be spending 6,500 euros for a week. They're like, great. We'll find the best venue in the world. We'll charge you 6,500 euros, and they filled it. They sold it out every year. Genius. That sounds better than making 30 euros or 40 euros or 50 euros a class, 15 times a week for 2 years to make the same money,
I want to take a moment to talk about something truly special and close to the heart. Miele Strega, my own line of natural handmade body products. And as you know, I am passionate about moving with ease and feeling good in our bodies, and that extends to what we put on our skin. Each batch of Miele Strega products is crafted with love, for real, by me, using ingredients from my very own beehives and my darling bees, combined with the pure botanicals. Whether it's a soothing, luxury whipped body butter, a nourishing lip balm, or a gentle soap, everything is designed to support your body's natural rhythm, just like the practices we explore here. If you're looking for skincare that's pure, it's intentional and deeply connected and aligned to nature, check it out at mielestrega.com. And because you're a listener, I've got a special gift for you. Use the code SYNERGY10, spelled with Y and Y, for 10% off your first order. Now, back to our conversation.
It was something that one of my coaches a few years ago told me, just like about this shift of model. As a yoga teacher, you can either keep teaching your, 10, 15 classes a week, low price, or you could include in your offering maybe one-to-one or longer programs that have a higher price, just to make business on the long term sustainable. And then going into retreats or teacher trainings, because it's at the beginning, of course, it's a more time to organize, but as soon as you get that going, it's possibly less working hours, or at least less physical hours, right? Because that is also something that we need to calculate. We work with our bodies, and you can actually make a living out of it. And it's really learning by doing and learning from your mistake. I had my first yoga retreat last year, so 2025. After the retreat, I realized that my pricing was a little bit off, right? So like, all right, okay, so for next year, we need to improve some things, but you will not know. It's like risk taking, right? I took the risk, it worked, but now let's do it again, but better, like learning from last year.
It's fun for me anyway. I don't know, because you look at the whole thing and you go, okay, I put all this work in and this was my result. Now, can I tweak a little bit here and there? Okay, and I'm making things up. I don't know what your retreat was, but I had 12 people. What if I had 14? I charged this. What if I charged that? What if I renegotiated with the venue? Something I did years ago, I used to do all my payments through PayPal and I was losing 4%. I'm like, 4%? What's that for? So I moved the payment system and saved 3% or whatever it was, Like all of these little things really add up. And then eventually, the second one's never as much work as the first because you've already done the basic work. You just make it better. Eventually, because I think with teach trainings, I think I've done almost 30 now. The amount of work it is to run a teach training for me now is really not much. It's all systematized. It's easy now, the organization, the whole thing. There's different people doing different jobs. And I just kind of rock up and do this thing. And I'm like, I love doing this and I get paid really well for it, But like you said, the first one is often a learning. My first retreat, I lost money. My first teacher training, I worked, 3 weeks of training full time plus months of organizing. I think I made $2,000. And I'm like, I remember calculating it going, $12 an hour. That's not very good, But I don't make $12 an hour anymore running trainings, because it's gotten better and better and better. But again, not everyone likes doing this stuff. And there is ways of going from your 30 euros for teaching class or whatever it is where you live. And that, of course, depends. If you're in New York, it's different to if you're in Ostrava in Czech Republic. It's a different scale, whatever. But you can do things like work for other people's retreats, get other people to organize things for you. I've been paid 70, 80, 90 euros an hour to teach, for example, to teach on other people's trainings. Like that's a cool in between. And I didn't even have to organize anything. I just turned up, taught some stuff, got paid. I was like, that's better than teaching classes. Because also, like you said, the physical thing, it's a lot. Or maybe your skill set is, because most people come into yoga as a secondary thing. Not many people finish school and become a yoga teacher. They do something else first. So how can I leverage my first skill set within the yoga world, for example, if it's marketing or if it's management or if it's anything, And then, okay, so maybe for one friend, for example, who does management and marketing for yoga teachers. And she gets a cut. She organizes their trainings and their retreats and their whatever. She stays at home, works on her computer, makes 20% of the retreat. Sounds pretty good. There's different ways as well. If you're creative and whatever, you don't only have to take big risks, which, they really exist. Look at what's going on in the world at the moment. There's a lot of people who have retreats and trainings and things organized that happen to be on the other side of the Middle East from, say, Europe. And they're all maybe not being cancelled, but at the very least being affected. And if you're not comfortable with that level of risk, then don't become an entrepreneur. Honestly, because you'll hate your life. Stressed out of your head the whole time. I hate yoga. He's like, no, you love yoga. You hate marketing, risk-taking, It's not for everybody. It doesn't have to be for everybody,
So it's very inspiring to listen to your story because you went and started to hold teacher training almost right away.
Yeah, way too early. I was two and a half years of teaching.
Still, look like the experience that you got. And in my head, I'm more like, oh no, I need to have a lot more experience to start.
Probably should.
So, yeah, you should.
Yeah, honestly. In a sense, I pushed myself into it because I started working for other people's trainings, which didn't feel so bad because I knew I had a certain skill set that was valuable. And I'm like, if I'm just sharing my skill set, I don't feel like a fraud or anything, The crazy thing was when I was there working on these people's trainings and going, the rest of it seems pretty average. I mean, I was sitting in some lectures and going like, I honestly don't think this teacher understands anything more than I do or is more prepared than I am or whatever. Yeah. And then when I went to, when the trainings that I'd done as a student, I felt the same thing. I was in India doing this training and just thinking, this guy doesn't really understand he understands anatomy. He understands yoga a little bit, but there's no connection between what he's saying. I reckon I could draw a connection, but that's also my personality type is a little bit like, I can put myself out there and then drown a little bit and figure out how to swim, I wouldn't have wanted to done my first teacher training. At least it was cheap back in the day. I mean, yeah, things have moved on a little bit since then. It's not really comparable what I was doing 2016 or whatever to what I'm doing 10 years later,
Listen, you have named what's going on in the world and in the Middle East, and as yoga teachers, we share messages of kindness, of compassion, on the so-called ahimsa, non-violence, living in the society and in the world as it is today. How do you think we can be really coherent in preaching kindness and compassion and then making maybe a bigger impact out there? What can you do?
It's a really interesting conversation, and thanks for bringing it up. Because like you said, what we're supposed to represent in the yoga world is so kind of obvious. We're supposed to be truthful. We're supposed to be non-violent. We're supposed to be compassionate, consider karma, dharma, whatever. Like whatever philosophical stuff you want to take and however you want to take it, all of it's about being a better person and being a kinder person and being nicer to others and trying to do less harm and less whatever. And then when there's like such injustice going on in the world and such crazy violence and stuff, it becomes a really awkward thing for the yoga world, because we're supposed to be against all of that. But the idea of being against doesn't sound very yogic, does it? Some ways people will talk about it is like, no, we just have to keep the non-dualistic view. There's always going to be violence in the world. There's always going to be hatred and blah, blah, blah. And our job is just to float above that. And I'm like, yeah, is it? I don't know if floating above a genocide, for example, sounds like the right thing to do. You know, if this was 1941 and you're in Germany, do you float above the Holocaust? Does that sound like the yogic thing to do? Imagine if yoga classes were in a place like that at a time like this. Like that, sorry. See, I've already done it. Like that, like this. There is such crazy stuff going on in the world. And yoga teachers don't know how to approach it, don't want to approach it. There's also this really awkward thing of conflict of interest. I can share a little story on that if you'd like in a moment. And it becomes easier for everyone just to keep their mouth shut, which I understand. Like I can empathize with that. It's not necessarily good for your career to make a stand about something or whatever. And I can actually give a little story, a little example. A friend of mine in 2014, when I was still in Melbourne, was organising a charity event to raise money for Gaza, because there was a war going on in 2014 where lots of kids were getting hurt and all this kind of stuff. So she organised a charity event that was yoga and sound and all the yogi things. Vegan food, everything. The whole community was going to get together. Everyone would pay to come. That money would then be donated to, I think it was Medical Aid for Palestinians, or one of these charities that do really, really good work in Gaza. She brought on a sponsor that was a meditation charity that had a lot of money behind them and it wanted to do good because they heard it was something for peace. They're like, we like the word peace. Peace is good. And once this charity got involved, the scope of this event, everything just lifted up because they had connections with media, and all of a sudden we were doing an interview for a newspaper. It was huge. All of a sudden it was huge. And then we had this conversation. And when I say we, it was mostly my friend who was organising it, but I was involved, about where the money was going to go. And one of the guys who was part of this meditation charity was like, you can't give the money to Palestine. And she's like, what do you mean I can't give the money to Palestine? She said, the guy from the meditation charity said, we're sponsored by Jewish donors and Israeli donors. And if you're planning on giving the money to whatever, it's not happening. And by that point, there's a venue booked and there's this whole thing. So all of a sudden, and I have a memory of this conversation happening while the guy from the newspaper, the photographer from the newspaper was there. All of a sudden, it was like this whole thing that you've organised in this whole event is not going to be how you want it to be. The money's not going to go where you want it to go because of power and influence and money from the donors of a charity. And the event goes ahead, everything's wonderful, we raise money. I remember teaching in class and talking about this is for the kids in Gaza. I was vocal because you can't, I'm a risk taker, right? But the money went to a different charity, no mention in the newspaper of the Middle East or anything. That's what happens. There becomes a level of conscious or unconscious fear to say certain things, to do certain things, particularly about the Middle East and particularly about what happened in Gaza or whatever. And if you stand up and if you do something, my example is I post a lot about this kind of stuff on social media. We've had death threats, we've had fake reviews. We had 30% of our positive reviews taken down from Google because someone went to the effort of flagging them. There's a price to pay for standing up about certain things. So then it becomes much easier for everyone just not to stand up. Because if you stand up, you get shot down, and it's death threat. I have to tell you, death threats aren't fun. Like, it's not a nice experience with me and my wife and my staff and everyone's getting threats like, we're going to do terrible things to you. And but I was just trying to encourage peace and justice and yogic principles. What's the message in all of this? It's like, it's hard to stand up and do the right things, do the right thing, in my opinion, to speak about things that matter and to try and have an opinion sometimes on terrible things and maybe raise money for certain charities and whatever. But I think we should all do it. Because if we all do it, they couldn't give us all death threats. That wouldn't work. The problem is everyone's so scared to say something. Only a handful of us do. And then the handful of us that do have to pay the price for it. Whereas if everyone did, can you imagine if every yoga school in the world, if every yoga teacher in the world stood up and said, hey, we are for peace. We are for kids not being blown up. We are for people not being starved. We're against war, whatever it is. Then there wouldn't be able to be. But they couldn't get all of us. It's so difficult. Anyway, that's my spiel on that stuff.
So what is if there are any yoga teachers out there who feel that this situation is terrible, is not just, is not fair, but still are afraid to speak up. You spoke into that a little bit, but what do you say it's a good first action, something small that you can do?
I think before they do or say anything, I think they need to have a bit of an internal dialogue and decide whether they feel comfortable with standing up, because there is going to be there's likely to be a blowback, and decide, I guess, where they want to land in themselves. Of it is kind of is this the kind of thing I'm willing to fight for, or to have some sort of, for use of a word that's a bit too dramatic, retribution, or, But at that point, I don't think you should make your yoga classes about Gaza, for example. And I have heard of stories where this has happened. Someone's gone to a yin yoga class and the teacher's talking about Gaza. And it's okay, it's a bit much, right? But at the same time, if this is something that's important to you, if this is something that matters to you, if this whatever, I feel like you owe it to yourself to use the platform that you've got to do something about it. Whether that's saying something or whether that's, raising some money, raising some awareness, can be really, really small things. And it can be about any issue, not just this particular one that I'm alluding to. What would you say? What would you say to someone else? What would you encourage someone else to do in a different situation? Imagine it's a different situation. Would you say, yeah, just be silent? Just no, don't stick your head up because you might cop some flack for it. You would never suggest that to anyone, would you? So give yourself that advice. I find it just kind of hard to believe that there's all these massive platforms, these crazy big yoga teachers and stuff. None of them are saying anything. You've got, for example, musicians and actors and public personalities. Billie Eilish is a good example. One of the biggest musicians in the world, making a massive stand about this stuff. Some of the actors, I can't remember this amazing Spanish actor's name. He was in June. Incredible actor. He's banned from Hollywood now because he stands up so much. But you can see that he's so comfortable in the decisions that he's made to stand up. What about all these yoga people who are just doing this, 10 million followers or whatever it is, and they're just deciding to, I don't want to upset the donors. I don't want to get the emails. And listen, I get that as well. It's a difficult. I had students from the past message me, you've let me down. I'm so ashamed that I studied with you. I can't believe that you're one of those people. They put the pressure on. They know how to put the pressure on.
It's also so easy to judge. I think nowadays with social media, we really like to put people in certain frames, certain boxes.
Good point.
Either black or white. you are now one of them, so that's wrong, I don't like you, I'm gonna unfollow you, right?
Exactly. You're the enemy now. Yeah, there's not a lot of dialogue that goes on because we're in these echo chambers, and you kind of
so rather than creating dialogue, you create a conflict. Like, I cannot talk to you anymore.
Yeah, we have a belief, maybe unconsciously, that everyone in my echo chamber agrees with me, and it becomes therefore so shocking when you see someone who doesn't. Like, I could have, the first post I did was whenever the Gaza thing started last time, 23 or whatever. The first post that I did, because I knew there was going to be blowback, was something about the animals in Gaza, the dogs. It was like a charity that was raising money for the dogs that were starving in Gaza. And for that post, I was told, you're the worst, you're a terrorist supporter, how dare you, don't you know that I have to go to a bomb shelter, blah, blah, blah. It's like, dogs? You don't want dogs to eat? And it actually, it was a really interesting process because it made me uncomfortable hearing these things, and it just like strengthened my resolve. This is also my personality type. I was like, so I'm saying the right thing. If someone's angry that a dog's getting fed, then I'm not interested in their opinion. You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense to me at all, you know? So, I don't know.
And I think that this happens because so few people express their opinion, which is
exactly.
as we're all agreeing. But I don't agree.
Exactly.
I don't agree with you. It's just that I'm not saying it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's an assumption, and then the assumption's broken that, this person isn't who I thought they were because I assumed that they would line up with all of my stuff or whatever. Yeah. Exactly. Anyway,
this is
big topic.
I'm very happy that we got to speak about this because this is a platform, right, that we have access to make an impact, right?
I hope so. Because that's
we do and we do our best.
Exactly. That's what yoga to me is trying to make the world a better place. You know, whether it's making a person individually feel better, and that's also one of the reasons that I focus on teach trainings, is because I know that they then go and have an opportunity to share with other people, and they're ripples. But I want those ripples to also go all the way, to Gaza as an example, to South Lebanon, and help those people as well that need help a lot more than the 30-year-olds. Most of my students, 30-ish from Europe, having a career crisis. They need less help than the families in south of Lebanon at the moment. Let's try and spread it to where it's needed most.
Stefan, our time is running out.
Yep.
I would like to ask you if you could share with our listeners where can they find you, how can they contact you, and if somebody's interested in working with you.
Oh, for sure. So you can find me on social media if you search my name, Stefan Camilleri, or the venue, Lanka Yoga. And you can also find those two websites, stefancamilleriyoga.com and lankayoga.com.
Beautiful. And I will get all these links from you, and they will be in the,
That's great.
in the episode's bio so that people can come in contact with you. I always encourage listeners to comment, to create a discussion, right? Because this is why we are here. So you and I are talking, but we hope to ignite conversations, reflections, a moment of just thinking, oh, he said something, something that maybe sticks with you for the whole day, for the whole week. Comment, send us messages so we can spark that opinion building. Let's express our opinions.
I love it. Of course. Thank you so much. And I'll be very happy to try and follow wherever this is posted. And if there's a question that anyone has, I'm very happy to answer it as well.
Beautiful.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time and for all that you share with us today.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Synergy Podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something within you, a new way of thinking, feeling, or moving. If you love this episode, let me know. Share it, leave a review, or connect with me on Instagram @mielestrega. And if you're ready to go deeper, check out my yoga offerings, come to a yoga class at the studio, and check out my handmade natural body products at mielestrega.com. Remember, your body is yours, your pleasure is yours, and living pain-free is possible. Until next time, move with ease and live with joy.